You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and today we're going to do a deep dive into Amazon advertising. Tons of changes that have taken place over the past year. Just came out of Unboxed a few weeks ago, their kind of flagship event out in New York City. And while I was out there, a bunch of people introduced me to Destaney Wishon over at Better AMS, and we hit it off. And I was like, "Hey, it'd be great to have you on the podcast." And so she agreed to jump on and kind of do a deep dive. But Destaney, I'll kick it over to you. If you want to do an intro on yourself and the company, that'd be awesome, and we can kind of jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Perfect. Sounds amazing. As mentioned, my name's Destaney Wishon, CEO of Better AMS, and I have been doing Amazon advertising for I think almost 6 years now, which doesn't seem like a lot until I think about what Amazon ads looked like when I started and just how much the space has grown and how much it's changed. So my expertise in everything our company does is really just go really, really deep on everything Amazon search, Amazon DSP, and with 6 years of experience in the space, you see a lot has happened.
Yeah, I mean, I just think back to the days, when you could do nickel and dime bids way, way, way back in the day. I could have just a person on my team jump in there every day, check it, set a budget, and we could kind of monitor it, and that's 7-8 years ago. Yeah, you're right. Like all of a sudden, we get to a point where it's incredibly competitive. People are asking all the time, should I advertise? Is it worth breaking into advertising? And now it's 100% a pay to play game. And so would love to hear your thoughts. If we start high level, I do want to kind of do a deep dive, but when brands jump up and they say, hey, is it worth jumping on to Amazon advertising now? Is it too late? I was just talking to a brand yesterday, and they've been on Amazon for 4 years. They haven't paid attention to it, and they're so far behind on ratings and reviews. Yep. Do they even pull that trigger, or do they, try to jump in with a Walmart or something like that? Would love to hear, kind of your thoughts there.
Yeah, so I'm obviously a big fan of Walmart because I live in Bentonville, Arkansas, but more of that later. In general, I think anyone who's unsure of advertising on Amazon or what direction they should go with their brand on Amazon needs to go onto the platform, put yourselves into the shoes of your customers, and most people are customers of Amazon, and type in your top keywords. And when you do that, the first thing you see is a headline search ad, 4 sponsored product ads, maybe 3 organic placements. So as a general question of should I be advertising for my brand? 100%. Especially if you're paying for an end cap in retail, if you're paying for any form of top of the funnel visibility, but you're not paying for Amazon search, which in my opinion is probably one of the highest purchase intent models in e-commerce. No one goes to Amazon and doesn't plan on purchasing. If you're typing in these keywords, you're planning on buying a product, which is probably the number one way to put your product in front of the customers in your aisle.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you said something too, is the keywords, right? Not necessarily your brand name.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's a lot of times people I type in my brand name, I'm right at the top of search. This is awesome. I've won. I don't know if you won unless you're tied. Right.
100%. And I think that's also a problem we see is a lot of people don't realize how granular you can go with Amazon advertising, especially if you're used to traditional media. They want to focus on kind of those key metrics, impressions, ROAS. But at the end of the day, you can go as precise as the customer search terms. So when you're looking at something like, hey, should I be paying branded spend versus non-branded spend? Again, it's kind of a zoom out. And do you want to acquire a customer that already typed in your name so they're already planning on purchasing? Probably not. It's strictly a defensive ad type. Don't let it inflate your ego and your ROAS. You need to be shifting those budgets to focus on the non-branded aspect. And you can do that by targeting on the search term level.
Yeah. So then what does an audit look like? Mm-hmm. Because you're right. I mean, you think about if you're searching on, we'll say toothpaste or something like that, right? So you can search by brand name, or it could be whitening toothpaste or enamel toothpaste or sensitive or sensitive whitening, enamel strengthening toothpaste.
Yep.
How should people be breaking down that portion? Because where we're at right now is I think people are trying to, I want to get into budgets too. People trying to set budgets for next year.
Yep.
Now I know it's, we're just out of Cyber 5 here.
Yep.
And, we're getting to the point where they'll be locked in, but in most cases, I'm from like big corporate America side. We didn't get budgets finalized until January, February, but, how are people doing the audit now? And then I want to jump into a little bit of, how should people be thinking about budget next year, given everything that's going on with Amazon?
I think when we're auditing brands, there's typically a few pretty big mistakes that we see. And one is not tying in the KPIs with the kind of targeting focus. So as an example, it's super easy to say, hey, I want a $3 to $4 ROAS. But if I go in an account and see that all of that is just acquiring that branded search, that's a pretty big red flag, because you're not actually going to grow on the platform if you're just targeting customers that were already going to purchase for you. So that's something that we do pretty in depth, is kind of segment out on the search term level. And in order to do that, you have to have very, very clean campaign structure. You have to make sure you're negating keywords in certain campaigns, only focusing on branded and others. And it's a lot.
So I do want to get into, I have a love-hate relationship with ROAS, but there's the part of it that's really easy to explain upwards to an executive team and they understand it, return on ad spend. The other side though is like, I don't think it's the most important metric to look at, but kind of what I'm hearing is if you're going to look at ROAS, and you're looking at the ad spend, break out the branded search, right, from the non-branded search and carve that out. Because you're right, it's going to be artificially high, right? I can get somebody a crazy ROAS like any day of the week by just bidding on their brand name.
Yep, 100%. And don't look at it with the metrics Amazon's giving you. Amazon right now gives you new to brand. And that new to brand is only for sponsored brands, which is typically less than 30% of your ad sales. And it's based off purchase history. So when Amazon's giving you new to brand, they're saying, hey, this person purchased from you in the last 365 days, which is cool, but it's limited and it's only covering half of your advertising data. And in reality, you should be pulling your search term reports and looking at branded versus non-brand on the search term level. Because if someone types in Liquid IV or Sensodyne, you know that your external marketing did its job and created brand awareness and they went to Amazon. So again, when we're looking at where we're wanting to target, it should be on the search term level versus it doesn't matter if someone's bought Sensodyne or if they bought Liquid IV. If they're going to Amazon and typing in sensitive toothpaste or electrolytes, doesn't matter if they bought you in the past. They would have typed in your brand name if they wanted you again. That's a customer that is probably not very loyal because they're not 100% sure what to type in. So you want to focus on reacquiring them regardless of past purchase history.
Are you finding, so I want to go just next level a little bit, because you brought up an interesting point is marketing teams get merged together, right? The digital marketing team and the marketing team, they're slowly getting squeezed together.
Yep.
And if I'm doing an external off Amazon marketing campaign, big branding campaign, maybe it's TV, I don't know what it is. Yep. Maybe it's print, who knows? When I run that campaign, right, I should also tie in then my Amazon search results.
Yep.
Right? To see, was there an impact?
Yeah.
Because if I'm a marketer, I want to justify the money that I spend.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see it when you run it and there's an uptick in store sales and you can get, POS data that comes in, maybe using IRI, Nielsen, whoever is telling you, wherever you're getting the data from. But Amazon, you might be able to see it uptick on that as well.
Yeah, 100%. And tracking on this, I think, is kind of the big problem for 2023 as everything becomes, I'm assuming everything's going to become more blended budgets and kind of budget fluidity based off cost per acquisition and platform volume. But how you tie all of that together is the major piece of the puzzle. Now on Amazon, it's not too difficult because they actually do give you kind of purchase data versus awareness data. So you can dive into your brand metrics and you can see, hey, branded searches percentage increase. And then you can overlay that with your external marketing campaigns. If you want to get super specific, again, you can do that on the search term level and say, hey, I ran this campaign during whatever. And now for the next week, I'd see my branded searches actually increased. And that's where you can say, hey, it probably did its job because most customers do see external marketing campaigns and then go directly to Amazon. And if you're not driving directly to your PDP, it's not easy to track.
Wow.
It's a lot of words, a lot of acronyms.
Yeah, no, I just, we're getting rapidly to this point, and I feel bad for marketers, the digital marketers, right? Because if you think their jobs changed more than anybody else's over the past like 3 to 4 years, where now what they're expected to do and keep track of and the budgets they're given and they have to be held accountable for, there's tools out there to use, but there's not a universal tool that's giving multi-touch attribution to allow them to see where they need to spend money and then justify how it's been spent. So it's all these disjointed platforms that people are trying to figure out. I mean, whoever comes out with the multi-touch attribution platform that actually works is like an overnight billionaire. That's the reality, right?
And it's funny because, I always joke, you go back to like 50 years ago, where it really came down to a lift test. Like you said, is you run any type of campaign, you check either POS data or just a general in-store lift. Now I feel like we have all of the data possible on this really micro level. You can go to Amazon, you can go to Walmart, and you can tie these things together. So it's like we have more data, more touch points than ever before, but we still don't have that big picture. So it's like this balance between, hey, who can be flexible and agile in this space and jump on all the new things and test, but while still focusing on the 20% that's driving the 80% of volume. It's this middle ground of kind of being pulled in all the different directions. Yeah.
And then on top of it, a new retail media network being launched every other week, right? Yes. Another retailer saying, hey, pay us, but not necessarily getting the same performance that Amazon is getting.
Yep. And then you have Amazon becoming more pay to play.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you continue to kind of invest in this media that's always been beneficial? It's high purchase intent. Your customers are loyal to it, but you're losing efficiency hand over fist. But if you invest in something new, it's a really big bet, and it's probably pretty hard to push internally of, hey, we need to move our budgets to DoorDash. Like the balance is insane.
Yeah. And then, and then I'm going to throw in the inventory piece, because think about it from a marketing standpoint. You used to market away, right? And inventory was in multiple different retail locations, and you just market and people will go buy it.
Yep.
But now we think specifically around like Amazon, who right now is in an inventory reduction phase.
Yep.
Now you're throwing in hey, I can't go all in on this advertising campaign.
Yep.
Because A, it's a new item and Amazon has none in inventory, or B, it's a super successful item, but they're only covering 2 weeks of inventory right now. Yeah. And, there's a lot of people over Cyber 5 who just literally like ran out of product.
Yep.
So it's diverting it to these third-party sellers, which you don't want selling your product either.
Yeah. So
as a marketer, it's like, hey, sell more.
Yeah.
And yet you're limited. You don't have that control of inventory that you need to have if you're pushing it.
What a interesting piece. I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts on this, kind of tying back into that original question of should you advertise, should you not? And tying into the inventory side is a complexity with retail media that I don't think most people are accounting for is the organic rank, the algorithm. The main issue is if you run out of stock or you pull back on advertising to focus on efficiency, there's a really big chance that you're going to actually take a hit to your organic rank as well. Because anytime you slow down velocity, that's a really strong indicator that Amazon should be ranking something or Walmart should be ranking something. So now your advertising is directly correlated with your overall revenue in a way that's not one-to-one, because you slow down your volume and now your organic rank potentially is dropping. And then as that starts dropping, Amazon's seeing that less people are purchasing your product, which is like a negative flywheel. Now everything's kind of dropping for your brand. You're like, well, I only decreased my ads by 10%. Why are my sales dropping by 20%? And that's the fun one.
Yeah, because then if you think about it on the advertising side, right, there's the advertising algorithm as well. Yeah. Right? I'll talk to a company like, hey, I just bumped up my minimum bid to $100 and I'm still not winning. Well, yeah, because you Amazon's not viewing you as a convertible product, right? Yeah. They're seeing it as Amazon, whether it's in organic search or it's in, I'll say, the paid search algorithm. They want to put what the customer is most likely to buy in front of them as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And so if you're not converting, right, then you don't show up as much then in the advertising algorithm either. That Amazon's not putting you out there, because if you're on a downward trend on conversion, fewer and fewer people want to buy that. So I'm going to put a different ad in front of people that I think they're more likely to buy. Wow.
That's one platform. And then you layer in every single other platform so in my opinion, I really do think the industry is going to have to go into a direction of kind of cost per acquisition across platform, of like, Amazon's a great example. Amazon conversion rates are still higher. Advertising conversion rates are a lot higher than any other platform because purchase intent is so high. But now that you're seeing cost per clicks and CPMs increasing, that efficiency is decreasing. So we're going to have to start looking at a model of, let's look at Walmart, let's look at TikTok traffic, let's look at Google traffic. Yes, our conversion rate's a lot lower, but our costs are so much lower as well that it balances out. So it's like, hey, what's our cost per acquisition across platforms? And then what's the max volume for that platform? Maybe we should be shifting budget away from Amazon and pushing it into these other ad types and assets, knowing that it's going to be a lot cheaper. Then everything's just going to be a blended ROAS and some share of shelf aspect.
I think the tough part with those platforms, a lot of them are just unproven, and they're so far behind Amazon, which is so far behind Google, right? If you take the traditional paid search and social marketer who gets all the data from Google and everything poured in, and they can select from this vast variety of different levers to pull. Amazon doesn't equal Google on that front. Now, the next thing though, if you're even not as advanced as Amazon, like, people are hesitant, but they know they have to at some point in time. They have to. Like, they can't keep pouring into Amazon, especially with Amazon's doing with inventory right now. I think strategically, in my mind, Amazon is pushing everybody towards the third party. Not everybody. I think this is a whole other podcast, which is Amazon pushing people third party? Because I believe that they are in a series of concerted efforts. They're not coming out and saying it, but this inventory and paid media piece are definitely part of it. Definitely part of it.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So do you, so what metrics should people focus on? Like, we'd love to hear your thoughts. And then I'd like to get a little bit of what came out of Unboxed. But
that'd be a fun one.
Yeah. What metrics, high level, do you think people should be focusing on? And I want to carve out the ROAS piece for one, because that usually helps a lot going upwards and explaining to people, because they don't have time to do a deep dive on what everything else means. But then what are the core metrics that you're using to help drive business across the board?
Yeah. So we go really, really in depth and granular, from everything from our campaign setup to how strategically we manage Amazon ads. So our setup allows us to dive into some of these metrics that aren't easily exported. So I kind of wanted to call that out. But in general, we look at everything in a kind of bucketing of branded versus non-branded. And then we layer in ad types, because kind of the ad types have very different objectives they should have associated with each. And then we take those metrics and apply them to the brand's categorization. So whether it's tier 1, tier 2 products, or if they have very different categorization that they're using across retail, we'll then pull all these metrics within those. And then we're going to really dive into cost per click, conversion rate, and that ROAS piece. So that way I can say, hey, for my non-branded sensitive toothpaste line, this is how I'm converting. This is how expensive that line is. Here's the ad types I'm focusing on, which is more strategic. Here's my ranking campaigns versus my profitability campaigns versus my conquesting campaigns for competition. And then we kind of dive into all of those variables. But if I'm talking very high level to a brand, it's, hey, knowing your branded versus non-branded traffic, knowing your conversion rate relative to your category, and knowing your advertising costs, because that's the variable you can control, is the bid and the CPC. And that's going to be your direct association with profitability.
Awesome. Love it. So Unboxed, my mind, incredibly scripted event. And yet there are nuggets to pull out of it. And there's some cool things. Love to hear like your kind of key takeaways as a whole. And we can kind of pick those apart.
Yeah. Unboxed was amazing. Probably one of the best conference and just terms of saturation of great minds on the conference floor. Like Amazon aside, you couldn't walk 10 feet without seeing someone that you look up to in the space. So major shout out for that. But on the content,
there's that one pod where it was like Jeff Cohen, right? And Kiri Masters and Melissa Burdick and Srinath was there, and then you came walking up and they're all like, Destaney.
It was so much fun. Like, I absolutely love the little community we've built in this space, because I feel like we all just run business in a very similar fashion, very like abundance mentality, just trying to do what's best for the industry. So I had such a great time. But for the content, I think, in my opinion, Amazon's moving in a really strong direction with ads. I think that they are finally giving so much more weight to brands. You know, they really started as the anything, everything store. They needed 3P sellers. They needed 300 different pins when someone searched for a pin. And now that they've built loyalty as a company, it's like, hey, no, people don't need 300 pins. They need the best 10 pins in the market. Just kind of funny, because I feel like it's more of a model of like what General in store has focused on. It's like, how do I get the best products in the hands of my customers? So with that, it's becoming so much more pay to play. It's focusing so much more on creative and brand building. You know, all of the new products they're releasing with Amazon Post, Amazon Lives, Amazon Influencers, even, you know, sponsored display video, or tying in DSP into more search. It's all going to be benefiting brands and those who know how to utilize those creatives and focus on conversion rate.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense though, right? Because Amazon is always customer focused.
Yep.
And so when you're the consumer and you're buying on the platform, amazing customer service, right? I mean, you can buy anything, return anything pretty much. But then as a brand selling to Amazon or on the platform, not so much, right? Hard to get a hold of a vendor manager. But then you flip over from the brand side. If you're an advertiser, again, you're now a customer of Amazon. You're giving them money. Yeah. And that was kind of one of the things that I took away from it, was like Amazon treating brands like they treat customers, because now brands are customers buying their advertising. Yes. So again, as long as you're handing Amazon money to buy a product that they have, they love you and they treat you really great, and they share an overabundance of information. Well, I don't know about an overabundance, but more than typically you would expect. And they're doing some amazing things. They keep putting out new products and new tools, like the the streaming data that comes out, which is a new feature. And we can jump into that a little bit, but that was what I took away, was like, wait a minute, Amazon's now treating brands like they treat consumers, which is really, really good. Now, I don't think that necessarily translates over to the sales teams and the vendor and seller central teams. They're still not reaching out to talk to brands, but
unless they think they can get you to spend more money.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's going to be a great QBR.
Yes. Invest in an SVS and we can be nice for, 8 weeks.
100%.
What about the streaming around, PPC data and conversion data? Have you plugged into that? Are you using that?
I think that's another fantastic call out of painting the picture. 6 years ago, it used to be 10 to 15 cent cost per click. So you had a lot of room for error. You could run these general auto campaigns on terrible keywords and it didn't matter because it was so cheap. You're going to run at a 10% A cost still. Now costs have increased a ton, and a lot of brands don't necessarily realize the effect that has in their advertising performance. So Amazon's having to piece together more and more data and insights, so that way they can go to their advertising partners and give us ammunitions to get brands to spend more money. Stream is a really big piece of that. They're doing a lot with AMC as well to give us the hourly insights to help us make adjustments and maybe justify day parting for the first time ever. Yeah. On the AMC side, they're slowly trying to pull in, this is what you're doing on DSP, this is what you're doing on search, and this is how those two work together. And I really think it's kind of rooted in, okay, page one's oversaturated with ads. The brands who are willing to pay $40 a click will pay $40 a click because it's an important space on the page. But how do we get them to continue spending when that efficiency decreases? And the answer is by giving people more data so they can make better decisions.
Right. I mean, it's funny because the day parting piece, all these companies up until recently, like, hey, we day part, we day gate, whatever you want to call it.
You're like, off like, what data?
Yeah, right.
Don't get me started on this topic.
Which is always funny to me, because when you talk to people, like, they only release it once a day, right?
Yes.
Like, the only way to do that is to every single day be turning multiple campaigns on and off, and then averaging them and assuming that there's no seasonality whatsoever.
100%. And then you push back with the conversation of, do you shop at midnight? Well, sometimes. Are you just clicking around, looking at other people's listings? Like, no. More than likely what people are doing is they're adding to cart and purchasing later. Like, no one goes to Amazon for fun. Like, you go to Amazon to spend money. So I think that little piece is always going to blow my mind. Of just because they clicked at midnight, there's a good chance that they're purchasing on the next day or the day after. And that's why we have a 14-day attribution window anyways. Like,
yeah. Which is that I build a cart, right? I
Yes.
don't want the UPS guy showing up every day. I don't.
28 different times. Yes.
Yeah. So,
and I got to talk myself into spending.
And then at some point in time I hit, okay, now it's a good number. Now this is good.
100%.
And I know there's people who shop different ways. Some people just like, hey, I don't care, deliver one box of Kleenex to my house. I don't care what it does, like, but
who cares about the environment?
I know, it's not me. Right. That with all the kids at home, every time they think, there's a present showing up. Like,
yes.
no,
yes.
It's Tide Pods and Kleenex. No. But what are you most like excited about? What, like, we were talking, I know, a little bit before this about like the future. Like, what do you think comes next for Amazon?
I'm really, really excited for the brand building piece. If we're being honest, I mean, I feel like everything we've gotten to do to date has always just been like keywords and data. And now really small updates, like being able to add lifestyle images to 66% of our ad types. Like, that makes a really big difference when you're scrolling the page and you see that headline ad with a really good lifestyle image. Mm-hmm. I think the direction Amazon's moving with Amazon posts and Amazon followers and customer engagement is super exciting, because like we have brands that have been able to gather and gain like 30,000 followers, which means they're able to email those 30,000 followers. And that's something that's been a, hot topic of Amazon, of owning your audience. So yes, it's baby steps and the tool's not amazing now, but everyone knows how siloed Amazon is. They're going to release something. We're going to be the ones to figure out whether or not it sucks, and we're going to provide the feedback, and then it's going to become exponentially better. So like those things are key indicators of the direction that the space is going. And I love the brand building and the creative side.
If we jump into those posts just a little bit and the followers, because I remember they launched it and everybody's like, well, what do we do with it? And it's like, we have no idea.
Yeah.
Like,
you can't even see the follow button unless you're like deep in a PDP and all this interesting.
But everybody wanted to know about it. Everybody wanted to do it. And then they jump into it like, okay, so we got these followers. What does that mean? Nothing.
Yes.
It means nothing. Nothing? Like, no, it's probably going to mean something at some point in time.
Yes.
But how are people leveraging that? I would love to hear that, because is it that powerful, or are we still on the path to it being incredibly powerful?
So I actually had to speak on this topic at Prosper. And for anyone who's like followed me, Amazon advertising is my expertise. And I got thrown into Amazon Post and I was like, all right, well, we're going to speak on this. But Amazon Post, in my opinion, are super valuable because they take up space on the product detail page. So regardless of if you can email them or if you can follow them, that space is free branding. And we know how expensive product detail page inventory is. So I pulled an account a few days ago and I basically just did the math on how many clicks we've gotten for our post and what our CPC is for the account. And I realized that we've basically gathered like 15,000 free clicks. Free. It's still content you're having to produce, but most people can syndicate it. Yeah. And it was super valuable just for that aspect. So just because you can take up space on your competitors' product detail pages, I think that's important. And then a lot of people probably haven't noticed this, but if you go and you search, sometimes you'll see a follow button on a sponsored brand ad. And it's something that we as advertisers can't necessarily, create right now, but Amazon's beta testing, putting a follow button on sponsor brands, which will exponentially increase the visibility of followers and how a brand can gather followers. So once that's fully rolled out, I think it'll be huge, because then customers will actually understand how to follow a brand. And then even without future innovation with these tools, you're able to email those followers. So the emails are obviously heavily templated. Amazon's not giving us a lot of free range, but if you have 30,000 followers and you can send them a product release email, it's a really great way to incorporate a launch, especially, when you look at what we used to do 5 to 6 years ago when we were able to have workarounds for building audiences and doing giveaways. Amazon wants to own that. So being able to incorporate that into your launch, I think will be really powerful in the future.
Yeah, I mean, if they can show that works, right, then they can charge you, right, for the email, but they could also charge you to put that follow button within the sponsored brand ads. I mean, it's a money play at the end of the day, but then if it can help you grow, I think what you're talking about as well is, hey, this is a new product launch that's coming. Still, the difficult part is getting inventory in there. But I have a lot of brands looking at like micro fulfillment centers. A couple of podcasts ago, Corey over at Da Vinci Micro Fulfillment is doing some crazy stuff where it's just backup, right? Because again, you can do all this stuff, but you still got to be able to get the product to them. And if it's not sitting in an Amazon warehouse or you run out of inventory, it's an issue.
Just a whole nother layer of complexity, like you said, with ads, because now it's, okay, do I need to have an FBM SKU? Do I need to have an FBA SKU? How do you switch between those when you're advertising? And sponsor brands, sponsor display, and DSP will continue to run if you're not in inventory, but someone else is. So then it's like, hey, do I continue to pay for this, 3P seller? It's a PO, hopefully, but it's a lot to consider.
Yeah. And, still a major focus, is limiting third-party resellers.
Yes.
Huge focus.
Yes.
Or just going to authorized ones that will still uphold and protect the brand. We started doing, events and webinars and dinners around that like 4 or 5 years ago, and we're still doing them because brand protection is still massive. I think that the podcast before this one, we tackle that specifically. And it's always kind of surprising to me that we're still tackling that people still think, well, hey, I've already made the first sale. It's gone to 3 or 4 different people. I've made the money. Why not let them sell on Amazon? Well, you can't advertise per se on PPC side. You can on the sponsored brand side, but what if that person isn't providing the branded experience you want and you're spending money and driving traffic to it? And anyways, incredibly, that's a whole, as of course, another podcast as well. But you're gung-ho on the posts, huh?
I am. I mean, right now it's free. You can have a virtual assistant take all of your social content, all of your UGC, and upload it, and in exchange, get 5 to 10,000 impressions. And that's just so important when I know how expensive those impressions are. I mean, over Prime Day, we consistently saw $30 to $40 clicks for some of our, highest competition categories, which is absolutely insane. So anything that we can do, I'm all about. I really love the 80-20 aspect when it comes to e-commerce because it's changing so quickly and there's so many shiny objects to get distracted by. And for post, it's like, hey, this is a really easy systemizable component that's going to give me a lot of impressions for free.
Wow. Are there other products that you see that are popping up? Video reviews?
Yeah, those are all fun things, I think. I don't do a ton on just the content side of the business. So when I'm kind of like looking at the new products, it's usually on the advertising side. Sponsored display video is really exciting, in my opinion. Everything they're doing to give DSP more opportunity to scale is important because the top of the page is incredibly saturated and it is becoming inherently more pay to play just because of how the algorithm works. So anything Amazon can do to diversify those ad costs, whether it's off-platform ads using their display network or diversifying the way we target on platform, is going to be really powerful for brands. So whenever they release something new, I always recommend going ahead and getting into the beta and testing with low bids, low budgets, and then scale as it needs to scale. But Sponsored Brands video is a perfect example. It's been out for almost 2 years now. You still have large brands that haven't adopted it because it's not easy to scale video assets per ASIN. But the people who got into that were able to see insane efficiencies because it was so cheap, and it's a cost per click model. That never happens with video ads.
No, I agree. And especially we're at a time where like TikTok is taking over, right? The average now, I think, is for Gen Z is 5 hours a day. So you're like, oh, well, how does that impact, Amazon? Well, it's all video content.
Yeah.
And it's changing how people are looking and viewing and searching and discovering. There's a huge chunk of them. I go to YouTube, I need to, fix something. A lot of people are going to TikTok to do research.
I've been testing that. I saw someone did a study on that and how, people are going to TikTok for product discovery. And I'm not a user of TikTok because I have no self-control. So occasionally I will download and log in and search for, hey, this in my area or this style of product. And it's pretty interesting because you can quickly see like viewers and really kind of assess like, hey, what do people value based off that?
Yeah. And it's changed the landscape of how people want to interact with other platforms as well, right? Think about Reels that is all of a sudden ramped up in how important they are. But then we have, the video ads. We also have, video reviews. Like video is taking over. People don't want to read anymore, right? They want to look. We did an interesting couple of events, dinners around, content, and the fact that now content and the images rank higher than the actual bullet points or product description. Yeah. Looking at a title, make sure it matches ratings and reviews, right? And then they're jumping over and looking at images. That's what I want to see. And which then looks into another whole thing, the ratings and review side and the gamification of that. But still, they're jumping over for validation at the visual content side rather than actual just reading anymore. It's pretty crazy. What do you think for budgets? What's going to happen next year? So a lot of concerns, economy slowing down, Amazon's trimming back inventory, especially in Q4. So they're going to be holding, the average, that I kind of see is between 0.6 and 0.7 months of inventory. Mm-hmm. So 2, maybe 3 weeks if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. How should people be thinking about budget for Amazon next year? Do you have a lot of people increasing it? Or are they holding it steady?
Holding steady or decreasing is probably what we've seen. On the enterprise side, I would say a lot more holding steady, but I'm concerned for a lot of the third-party SMBs.
Yeah.
I think most people have probably read Shoe Dog, and they understand the difficulties that go with having a cash flow intensive business focused around inventory. And you combine that with just declining margins in a competitive landscape, and it's getting a lot more difficult. And the conversation I'm constantly having to have is, we can pull back budgets. That's okay. I understand as a brand, as an entrepreneur, you need to pull back budgets, but you just have to be careful that you don't decrease your volume too much, because you're going to be in this, again, negative flywheel that's going to hurt your rank. And then it's going to hurt your overall business, because people are always going to pay to play, especially on Amazon. And it's providing an advantage to these larger brands that just have more money to spend. And that's a little bit of a concern. I think Amazon's algorithm in general is potentially going to have to change, whether it's the honeymoon period or what they're doing, because it is all top of search ads. And the people who can afford to pay those isn't necessarily the SMBs. So how are they getting exposure? And that's a hard question.
Right. They're not, right? That's the reality. And I agree with you. I have a ton of them right now, just looking to get into retail. Actually, but maybe you should have started 3 years ago, which is tough, right? Or 2 years ago, really, really tough as retail was closing up, right, for a little while. But it's the reality is, at some point in time, what I'm really seeing is this, the ability to have a pure direct to consumer online brand is tougher than it's ever been right now. And a quarter from now, next year, it's going to be even tougher than it is right now.
Yeah.
I think, the one thing is if budgets are going down and there's fewer bids on keywords, then maybe PPCs come down, right? The pricing comes down as well.
Yep.
But
I think it also comes down to finding a way to own your audience. So that way you're not having to rely on Amazon, because when you're relying on Amazon, there's so many variables out of your control. You could easily be bidding 50 cents every single day, and it takes one competitor coming in, jacking up bids to $3 to really change your cost per acquisition. So what I'm telling a ton of people is, with that being out of your control, find a way to build an audience, whether or not it's connecting with people on social or your email list. You don't necessarily need to acquire that audience on that platform, but if you can even drive that traffic to Amazon for a cheaper cost, then that's something you're going to want to look at. Because I'm having to have so many conversations with brands that are like, we need to lower a cost. We need to lower our tacos. We need to increase our ROAS. And I'm like, okay, we can do that. But the moment we lower bids, we're lowering volume drastically. So do not come back with, hey, why is my revenue decreasing? When 70% of your sales are coming from ads, it's gonna be hand in hand.
I mean, that's where I hear a lot of it is 70 to 80% of revenue right now coming from advertising. That's a tough spot to be in. If you're not a big brand, obviously for some, if you're a well-known household name, people are going to show up. Or you've got a great, just, all around, niche brand name, you can do it. But Amazon is 100% pay to play. And that's a conversation I think, some marketing teams are avoiding having, or have avoided in the past having with executive teams about how pay to play it is. That it's not traditional advertising where you don't, you can just kind of splash it out there and people will show up at a variety of stores like that. That advertising is strictly focused on Amazon. And that's where you get into this tug of, where does the budget for that come from? Right. Because it was getting pulled out of the bigger marketing budget because that's what had been allocated for the past couple of years. But then you've got the salespeople for all the other in-store accounts that are like, wait a minute, half of what you're spending is on Amazon and it's just hitting there and it's not affecting me. Where, 3 years ago, 95% of what you were spending was off Amazon and it benefited everybody. And that's going to be an interesting thing to balance out. That's,
There's been a lot of really interesting content just on brand versus performance marketing in general. And I think that conversation does translate to Amazon still as well. We're seeing it now more than ever due to the increasing costs. Like everything used to be really easy bottom of the funnel Amazon because CPCs were so low. But now that we're seeing, hey, massage gun is a $30 bid. It's like, hey, maybe we should look at moving up the funnel and remarketing. Maybe that's going to be a lot more efficient. And let's focus on how do we bring customers to the platform, and then they're going to find our products regardless. So that way we're not having to educate them from a sponsored product ad, which we have no control over click-through rate and creative because it's the listing. It's kind of that's another whole push-pull dynamic that's been really fun, is like, when do you move from performance to brands? When do you, move up the funnel and justify paying for impressions? That's it's a fun space to be in.
Well, yeah, but even if you think about it if you are driving off Amazon traffic, right? If you're driving traffic from off Amazon to a detail page, Amazon loves that traffic. If there's conversions from that traffic, I mean, the algorithm loves that, right? You're grabbing a consumer from someplace that wasn't shopping on Amazon. They're landing on Amazon. They're buying a product and maybe more. I mean, that plays into the search algorithm huge. And if you can get it, I think this is the natural progression is, as we tapped out Amazon for its, efficiency in its price and how much we're paying for each conversion. Now, the thing is not to just keep doubling down at that higher price, but like you're saying, like drive traffic off Amazon, have it point to Amazon and help it grow. No, crazy. Any questions like that you're curious on? Like, I've been asking you tons of questions, like for the past, 30, 40 minutes or so. What's any questions you want to throw back my way?
Yeah. So since we strictly manage Amazon advertising, one of the barriers we have to drive success is just a brand's general performance. What's their conversion rate? So I have a lot of people that will come to me and be like, hey, drive more traffic to this page. And I'm like, I can do that, but your conversion rate's a 5%. So don't expect your sales to immediately increase. What are the biggest mistakes you're seeing on just the conversion rate listing building side? Or misconceptions, not even mistakes.
Yeah. So I think you nailed on it. The reality is if you're driving traffic to a detail page that doesn't have newly optimized content, right? It doesn't have the video built-in video. Maybe there's video reviews. I mean, if you haven't optimized that page, and you're driving traffic to it, yeah, you're going to get a ton of traffic. But if the conversion rate is low, you get hooked on a crack you can't get off, because that deprioritizes it in the organic search ranking and in the paid search ranking as well. And you get into a downward spiral that the only way to pull that back out, right, is not dumping more in, is pausing it and actually rebuilding the content. So anything you're driving there. And so that misconception around, hey, I'm going to drive traffic to a detail page simply so I can get more detail page views and more conversions and hopefully more ratings and reviews. They commonly forget, what is the conversion rate? And if the conversion rate is low, man, there's a big issue with that. And it's not long for Amazon to figure out the conversion rate, right? I think it's under, like, if you're launching a new product, like those first 4 weeks are when Amazon is really determining the long-term potential of that SKU and how you handle it and what you do with it and how you drive traffic to it and whether or not you have inventory. I think people oversimplify what paid media does in driving traffic to it. So again, it seems basic, but
yeah,
it is, how optimized is your content? And the content now, it used to be, I would refresh my content like once a year. I would be able to touch it. And every quarter I had a different 25% of my top, 50 ASINs that I 50% of ASINs that I would touch. Some laggards I didn't get to as often. But now you have to be staying on top of what are the newest trends across multiple different platforms.
Yeah.
Perfect example was a TikTok one. Video is there. Images are there, right? You can't just have, like you're talking about, lifestyle images that you're able to put into different ads. Like, it's a whole different ball game. But sometimes people are lost in everything I'm doing around the advertising piece and not, oh, wait, I really need to focus on the content that's on that page that my audience is looking for, right? So, I mean, you're selling lazy boys, I'm exaggerating here a little bit, older demographic, not as important. You're, selling, a Theragun, right? Younger demographic. They want to see lots of great images. They want to see a video. They want to see a demonstration in it. They want all these other things. And if you don't have them, no matter how much money you spend, like it's not going to go. That's what I see is, sometimes people overlook the basics.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a long-winded answer, but to get back to overlooking the basics of great content. Yeah. So what gets you up in the morning? That's, as we're getting to the end here of time. What gets you pumped up every day?
I got thrown into this space. It was my first job directly out of college. And thankfully it stuck because there's no leaving now. I'm way too far in. But I love how quickly it's moving and changing. And I know that can be really intimidating to a lot of brands because a lot of brands got to be a very large size because they were great at building systems. They were great at doing things repetitively very well. And now I'm looking at the space, like there's days where I wake up and I'm like, what is an advertising console? This is brand new. There was no newsletter, no announcements. I have more tools that I can, use to my benefit. So how rapidly the industry is changing, I think is always really exciting. And how I think the people, the brands, the agencies that are going to succeed are the ones who can consistently do what works really well, but also leave space to learn and, nonstop learn, test, and really kind of use that to their advantage. So that makes me really excited, as well as just the community. I think you kind of hit on it earlier in this podcast, but we're all thrown into this fire. So being able to send someone a LinkedIn message or meet someone at a conference and go get drinks, that's all really exciting. Like I could have never been successful in this space without people who are willing to just answer questions and help. So that's my favorite thing about what I do, is being able to connect with an audience and just teach them things and use all of my mistakes and learnings to others' advantage. So I love that.
Yeah, no, I love it too. The community here is just unique on the digital side.
Yeah.
Especially people who have been in it, over, 4 or 5 years now. It took a unique person to jump in early on, somebody who liked to network, who liked to knowledge share, who thought, hey, I don't know it all, but I really, really want to learn more.
Yep.
And I'm open to connecting with anybody that's going down. And so it's a really unique person that jumped in. And no, I agree. Then it's made for this really, really cool community where, you think about that kind of group that I mentioned, overlaps some as far as services and competitors in a way. Nobody cares, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's there to network, knowledge share, and that abundance mentality, and as much as I can help you get whatever you ever wanted, then, in return, people help me get whatever I ever wanted. And so just
it's always day one.
What's that?
It's always day one.
It's always day one. Awesome. Well, Destaney, we're going to wrap it up here. Thanks again. And again, if you guys want to reach out, Destaney Wishon, you can reach out to her on LinkedIn. Better AMS, just great friends and partners of a lot of different people in the network. And so I encourage you to reach out. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. Thanks everybody for listening in.
Thank you.